The words escaped my mouth before I could stop them, spilling out in a moment of unguarded frustration. While confiding in my sister, I recklessly confessed that if given the chance to start over, I wouldn't choose to share my life with my husband. In that brief instant, the statement felt trivial, merely a release of pent-up irritation. But the moment I glimpsed his face, I knew I'd made a grave error. He stood just out of sight, absorbing every syllable. He didn't yell, didn't demand answers, didn't even seem enraged. His eyes locked onto mine, vacant and unreadable, before he turned and walked away. The sound of the front door closing rang louder than I expected. In that heartbeat, I understood I'd said something I couldn't take back. At first, I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself it wasn't a big deal. Couples fight, don't they? People say things in the heat of the moment that they don't mean. It's just part of being together, I reasoned. But as hours passed and he didn't return, my nonchalance began to twist into a gnawing worry. I fired off a text, then another, checking if he was okay, but my phone remained stubbornly silent. A heavy unease settled in my chest, pressing harder with each unanswered message. What if my careless words had cut deeper than I realized? What if I'd exposed a fragility in our bond one hadn't even noticed? His absence wasn't just a few hours away. It was the growing dread that I'd planted a seed of doubt that might unravel everything we'd built. What if he chose not to come back? Initially, I told myself he was blowing it out of proportion. I even laughed it off with my sister, assuring her he'd return once he cooled off. But as the night dragged on and the house stayed eerily quiet, my irritation began to mingle with panic. I kept telling myself he was fine, that he'd walk through the door any moment, but a knot tightened in my gut. I sent another text, keeping it casual. You good? But the silence stretched on, fraying my patience. How dare he freeze me out over something so small? I fumed, my frustration growing sharper. By the time I slipped into bed, I was restless, my thoughts oscillating between anger and fear. The helplessness was maddening, as if the foundation of our relationship, which I'd always taken for granted, was crumbling beneath me. The next morning, his side of the bed remained untouched, and the anxiety I'd tried to push down surged over me like a tidal wave. His toothbrush still rested in the bathroom, his shoes still neatly aligned by the door. It was as if he'd vanished without a trace. I sent another text, more direct this time. Can we talk about this? Still no response. The silence was overwhelming, and my frustration boiled over. Was this his way of making me feel guilty, of teaching me a lesson? I tried to convince myself I wasn't at fault. If he had a problem, he could have stayed and hashed it out like an adult. But even as I defended myself, the tightness in my chest grew heavier. I despised being ignored, despised how his silence forced me to question everything. For the first time, a chilling thought crept in. Had I crossed a boundary I couldn't undo? Was he truly finished with me? The possibility terrified me, though I wasn't ready to confront it. By the second evening, the stillness in the house felt oppressive. I was sitting in the kitchen when I finally heard the front door creak open. Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived. Derek stepped inside, his demeanor calm but altered, resolute in a way that unsettled me. He didn't raise his voice or throw accusations. Instead, he said simply, "We need to have a conversation." His tone was steady, almost distant, and it threw me off balance. I tried to deflect with a sarcastic remark, hoping to ease the tension, but his unwavering composure unnerved me. When he began to speak, I realized this wasn't just another spat. With piercing clarity, he described how my words had hurt him, not just what I'd said that night, but the way I'd been treating him for years. Each word was like a mirror, reflecting my own flaws back at me. I wanted to argue, to justify myself, but deep down, I knew he was right. Then came the words I wasn't ready for. Maybe I don't belong here anymore. My heart sank as he picked up his bag and left again, his quiet resolve feeling final. I stood rooted to the spot, the weight of my mistake crushing me. The days that followed blurred into a haze. The house, once filled with his presence, now felt empty and oppressively silent. I kept waiting for a message, a call, anything, but Derek remained completely unresponsive. I threw myself into work and leaned on friends to distract myself, but nothing could fill the growing void. Weeks later, when I saw him again, he was transformed. At a coffee shop, he looked healthier, more at ease, as if a weight had been lifted from him. And he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman who exuded warmth, and the way he laughed with her, a carefree joy I hadn't seen in years, cut through me. For a brief moment, I wanted to rush over, to remind him I was still his wife. But I was frozen. All I could do was watch the man I'd taken for granted move on, without me. In that instant, the full weight of my actions crashed over me. This wasn't just about one thoughtless remark. It was about years of treating him as if he weren't enough, as if I didn't value what we had. And now, he'd chosen himself over trying to fix something that had been broken for too long. As painful as it was, I knew he was right. For the first time, I wasn't just alone. I was bearing the burden of my own mistakes. To move forward, I had to face the truth. The problem wasn't Derek. It was me.